Hello, everybody. You have tuned in to Erekose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover virtually any aspect of making a murderer. I go over the evidence, the documents, the photos. So if you like, stay tuned, and in the future I'll have many more videos besides the one you're about to see. Hello there, everybody. Hey, how you doing? A little upload here today. This is some footage of me on Purple's channel the other night. I went on there. She was talking about Kathleen Zellner's reply, the motion for leave to reply, and then the reply to the state's response regarding the bone issue. And so she asked me if I wanted to come on and talk about it, so I did. And so I decided to go ahead and show you guys that here today. I went ahead and showed you guys this graphic again. This is, courtesy of Miss Susan Sexton. So, this is one of the awesome pieces that she's created, along with O'Kelly, the camel for Brendan, with the straw on its back, and Fassbender and Kratz underneath it. And everything, and she's done a lot of great things, so I decided to show this today. But anyways, had a really great discussion with Purple over on her channel, talking about the case, Stephen and Brendan, and it was a very good discussion. So let's go ahead and get to it, and we'll see you guys at the end. Hello.
Hi, there you are.
Okay, here I am.
There you are. This is Zoom. Welcome to Zoom.
All right.
So
I hate downloading things and using new things. I like stuff I'm used to, but I'm here. Hello.
Zoom is the best. It beats like every other system. I can have up to 100 people on a panel. It's awesome. I use it for Patreon meetings, everything. So most of you guys that are in here for Making a Murder know who Erekose is. Doesn't really need much of an introduction. For those of you that don't know who he is, Erekose is doing Making a Murderer videos. He's done hella more than I have. He's got like 500 or something videos, because that's all he covers, basically. He dabbles into a few other things.
That's not fair. Scott Davis. I'd like to say Scott Davis after she said that.
No,
Sorry, go ahead.
You do like one or two, but your main thing is Making a Murderer. Mine no longer is. But
I understand. Yeah.
So that's Erekose. He's got a channel. The mods are going to post it. So, all right, Erekose, I'm sure you've read this motion, correct? All right. Yeah. I haven't read the whole thing. I skipped through it here and there because I think it's 60 pages of bullshit and maybe like 5 pages of good. But in the very first one, she goes on to say that the defendant, that the state didn't have a right to respond. That's crock, because in every single case ever in like the court of law, the other side has a chance to respond to a motion. Nobody gets that free pass.
Well, do you remember? Well, the reason we're talking about this is because if you remember with the CD, when Judge Sukowitz made her decision on that, she said, "Look, I never asked for a response from the state, and I never asked for a reply from the defendant. So I am just basically going to act like that never happened." And she just like threw them out with and she claims she never even read them. Whether that's true or not, but she claims she never read them and she just got rid of them. We're anticipating that she might do a similar thing here, where if it wasn't asked for, she may just be like, "Oh, I'm not going to even worry about this." So I think Zellner went with a little different tack this time, where instead of just offering her a reply without being asked for it, she's saying, "I'm asking for motion for leave to reply to what the state's response was, because if you do read it, we want you to know these things," essentially. And to me, it's like a respectful way she's trying to approach the court and say, "Look, we're trying to play by the rules here. We're trying to play ball here," when the state is being very dishonest and very, shady in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? So that's what we base that on, is that she did it before. And so we're kind of wondering which way she'll go this time. You know.
Okay, which I can tell from the way she follows up, because then she goes into a real motion. And I kind of felt like this was just something thrown against the wall. If it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But if it doesn't, she's prepared with 68 pages behind it. I'm reading that right?
Well, what she does is she's basically asking for motion to file, and then what she does is attaches as the first exhibit is basically her reply, and so that's an exhibit in her motion for leave. It's interesting. This was done. This is different than any other like reply or response I've ever seen, because it's a little bit different. But once you get into that part, the exhibit where it's basically her reply, that part's very interesting. She's to me, there's a lot of interesting things about it. One of the things is where she's basically kind of arguing how the state's arguments aren't really fair or true. And then there's one point where she actually turns the whole procedural bar thing around on the state and starts arguing that they're like procedurally barred from arguing, you know, basically committing judicial estoppel and like changing their stance. It's like, first you said we could test these bones and bring this issue. Now you're saying it's procedurally barred. You gotta pick one and stick with it, because they're just going with whatever suits them at the time at the moment. So there was, I don't know, for me there was a lot of things in there where she was calling the state out on its just dishonest, you know, deeds and its dishonest way that it's dealing.
And we're gonna get to that. I just literally I read the whole thing in like 20 minutes, so you know I didn't really read it that well. But and I admit it, like I am so, and I hate to say it, I mean everyone knows, I know up until 2018 there wasn't a thing about this case I didn't know. I covered it balls to the wall.
Oh yeah.
But I got so bored. Like I'm so done with it that, you know, obviously I'd still cover it. I built my other channel on it. I would never take that away from people that sub to me for it. But it just got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. You know, like I'm just bored with it. But
I remember when you first started, and you were like all there on your little camera, just like all squeaky, and still not as, you know, you're much more sure of yourself nowadays. But it's funny to think back of how we were when we started, right?
I had fun.
Yeah, I remember you though. I mean, I wasn't doing YouTube videos yet when you started. I probably started maybe about 4 months after you. But I do remember being on Facebook and seeing your videos pop up. You know, probably what was it, about 6 months after MAM came out? And
no,
it was just, you were just there on your camera. You hadn't even gotten it focused in yet. Like one of them, you were like your head was in there, and it was like the rest of the image was like the room around you. It was funny, and you ended up changing it.
I started 1 month after. I started in February or March. So 2 months after MAM came out is when I started.
March? Okay, I thought it was March, April. It was. I know it was some months after MAM came out, but you were. I remember you were later out of the gate than like Casey and Ripper and, you know, who's that other guy? I can't remember his name now.
I don't know.
There was another guy who had done a lot of videos back in the beginning. I haven't seen him in years now, but there was those, and then you popped in probably really soon, I remember. But yeah, I remember you were a little bit after the main crowd.
Yeah, I didn't care for some of the things Casey was saying, and I knew she was wrong on stuff. So that's when I started making videos. I'm like, you know what? There's no other females doing this, and I need to get my opinion out there. I don't. So I turned on my laptop and I said, "Here I go. I'm just gonna make a video."
Right. How it starts, right?
That's it. And now look at me. Now I got Zoom. I got, you know, Streamlabs. I got merch.
Toys.
Exactly. I got merch done. I got a fucking brand now. I got patrons. All right.
There you go.
So the second thing, I want to skip to the bottom because, like, I read this like I read an essay. I read the first paragraph, the last paragraph, and some bullshit in between. But the rapid DNA testing. So the rapid DNA testing, by definitions, everyone knows what we're talking about. Rapid DNA testing is a new technology that allows law enforcement to analyze evidence on the crime scene and deliver results within a couple of hours. This timing is significantly shorter than the typical turnaround time often needed for DNA analysis. Now, and then she quoted, or not quoted, she posted like 10 different pages of where rapid DNA is useful. The reason why she posted all that is because the judge said rapid DNA doesn't apply and, it's pointless.
So
So,
the state claimed
denied
that,
her
right?
for it. So KZ in this answer put in like 10 different news reports and, actual peer review stuff showing that it is important and it is valid and the science community does take it valid.
Yeah, and
Now,
she cites in the motion here like two different states that have now made it. The governors have like made it their way of testing DNA in their state.
mm-hmm.
There's a couple other like two or three other agencies like that are in criminal justice or whatever that we're going to start using it as well. It was interesting. She's pointing out that in recent years since the what they called the Rapid DNA Act. Thing. Since that was written, there have been some strides with this rapid DNA testing, and the state is just kind of failing to acknowledge that. So that's what she adds in as part of her proof in this, saying, "Look, this has been getting used on crime scenes if you do it the right way and that sort of thing. It has been proven to be viable." And so she's just pointing out their casual disregard of what's actually going on in the present.
Okay, but here's my issue with it. One of the key words in the definition is that it's used to test crime scene. They don't have a crime scene. It's fucking 11 years old. So I don't understand how rapid DNA it may have DNA left, but you don't need rapid DNA with a crime scene that's 11 years old. I have never understood, and again, I'm not into this case anymore like you are, so that's why you can help me out here. Yeah. I don't get the point of using or making this such a major issue when the crime scene is 11 years old and she's had 3 years to test this shit. So what's the point of the rapid DNA?
Part of this motion is she's replying, to the state's claims that Stephen could have raised this sooner, for instance. The state claims that they could have raised this issue back when her investigator made the FOIA request and ended up getting the post, the most recent investigation into the murder of Teresa Halbach, the one that was opened after her motion for post-conviction relief was filed. That one, they got all that, right? And what was supposed to happen is it was supposed to be everything, but what was I about to say? Anyways, when that stuff got turned over, the state was saying that they would then have been able to know that those bones were missing. Problem is Kirby is saying no. Well, actually, one of her law clerks is saying no. We didn't get the 1,117 pages of queso. That wasn't delivered. What we did get was the stuff of the new investigation. So the argument is, if we didn't get that information containing pages 1,114 and 1,115, which are the pages that state they gave all of these bones back to the Halbachs, they didn't receive that. So therefore, they didn't know then. They couldn't have raised it then. They raised it as soon as they found out. As literally the moment they found out about it, they raised it. And so they're pointing out that the state's argument is disingenuous there.
Thank you, Tiara. Okay, but what difference is the rapid test going to make than just doing a regular DNA test? The case is not going to end that they need rapid DNA within three hours. So that's why I'm not grasping the importance of this rapid DNA.
I think it's important to understand that the rapid DNA test is actually, it's just a new style of technique for DNA testing where most of the analysis is automated and done by computers. So it kind of removes human error or emotion or anything like that. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons why it's catching on. But it's also very sophisticated. Literally, it's smart enough that any layman could walk up to the machine with for example, a swab from a rape victim. Okay. Now that swab is going to have most likely vaginal fluid from the victim on it, and it's going to have seminal fluid from the perpetrator on it. That's basically two different kinds of DNA it's going to have on it. You can toss that into the Andy machine, or you can go through the proper procedure of putting it through the Andy machine or whatever. And Andy will be able to separate those on its own and give two separate profiles and basically sort them out from each other. So it's basically what makes Andy so interesting is its sophistication. And it's still new, though, as I was talking about with Scooby tonight over on my channel, folks. It is still new, so it is still in the proving grounds kind of process. But it is getting accepted in places. It's looking like it's a pretty solid way to test DNA.
But what DNA are they testing? Like
they would be pulling actually, from what I understand, they take a piece of bone and then they do whatever they do to prepare it and put that through the Andy machine, and they extract actual DNA and actual STR DNA from the actual cells of bone.
Okay, but the bones.
And he's done this in the California wildfires, where there were bones that were burned just as badly as the ones look in this case, and he was able to get profiles from some cases as bad as that in the California wildfires.
Okay,
so that's why they think it might work here.
But go a little deeper. What are they trying to prove? What is she trying to prove? Okay. Like,
so what she's saying is, it's just like at trial when Dean and Jerry were arguing that we have bones over in the quarry. These are most likely bones from Teresa Halbach or whatever. So the problem is if we find these there, then we have to believe that Stephen Avery would have brought the bones back to his own doorstep and dumped them in his own fire pit. And so that's basically was the argument of Dean and Jerry at trial. Kratz in his closing says, because he's so worried that the jury may listen to Dean and Jerry, he says, I'm not even going to spend 20 seconds on those bones because the best that can be said about them is they're possible human. Okay? So that tells you right there the state is worried about the fact that if it's determined Teresa's bones are found in the quarry, that is really bad for their case, and they are clearly worried about the jury hearing that or believing that.
I remember that. But
but basically what I'm getting at is that this is meant to make it undeniable that the bones what it was meant to do was make it undeniable that those were Teresa's bones in the quarry, so that Zellner could therefore make her argument like, look, he obviously wouldn't have brought them back to his own doorstep, so clearly something else was going on here, essentially.
Okay, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here and go even a little further.
Uh-huh.
They believe that, all right, Kratz had said, let me give some pre-stuff. Pre-cum, no. Kratz was saying in trial and throughout everything that the bones that were found in the quarry were possible human bones. As of now, they believe that they gave the Halbachs back all the major bones, and whatever's left is left. But they gave back any of the human bones, supposedly, that were supposedly maybe not even human, according to Kratz. So that's the backstory. Mm-hmm. But if you think about, again, you guys know how I think, the totality of it and connecting the dots, they believe, or their theory is that Stephen had gloves on when he was in the car, and that his hands were covered. That's why, the blood may have come out, or there's been many theories. Right. So when you were saying that, my first thought reverts back to, if he had gloves on, any kind of gloves on, his DNA is not going to be on the bones, but that still doesn't prove he didn't do it. And even though we all know he didn't do it, I'm never going to say he did it, but even though we all know he didn't do it, legally in a court of law, how can a court, I don't see how Zellner can fight that, because because he didn't touch it or his DNA's not on it, definitively does not prove that he didn't do it.
She's not testing for Stephen's DNA. She's actually testing the bones to prove that they are Teresa's bones. And so the argument goes this way. She also noticed in Eisenberg's ledgers and reports that a lot of these bones had saw marks on them. So it suggests that the breaking up of this body happened out in the quarry. Okay. And that most likely the burn happened at the quarry, and that somehow then, at that point, 60% of those bones were collected. Some were left around the quarry, but 50 to 60% of them were then dumped in Stephen Avery's burn pit. And she's going to reason, her argument is going to be this: it doesn't make sense that Stephen would have brought these things back and dumped them on his own doorstep. So it suggests that somebody else is involved. It suggests his innocence. And and so that's where she's going with this. And the reason why that this is a valid argument is because why I was pointing out how very keen the state was to discredit Dean and Jerry's claims that could have been the original burn site. They wanted to say, I'm not even going to spend 20 seconds on those, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
that's the state's fear of this, coming out. What the heck was that? Anyway, sorry. Anyway, that's why, so for me, there's real fear that you see in the state by the way they act, that the jury might have believed that. So that's why I think she feels it's valid. It could undermine confidence in the verdict, which is the whole point of going through post-conviction process, is you're trying to undermine the confidence in the verdict. And that's what this will do, or would have done. But the evidence wasn't saved as it was supposed to be, according to Wisconsin statute, written by Norm Gahn, folks. The guy who was one of the prosecutors on Stephen's trial himself wrote the statute that they have broken. The biological evidence should be preserved. And if it does get destroyed, then there is supposed to be notice sent to Stephen, his appellate attorneys at the time, and all that. And there was never a word. And all of these pages of queso and the ledgers, the updated ledgers that show that they gave these bones back, were all sat on and hidden and not handed over. Okay? Even when Kirby paid for the entire queso, they still didn't hand it over. Okay? Zellner's offices only received the new investigation. So
that I know.
It's, you see the games being played, and it's just becoming more and more evident as we watch this roll out.
Okay. But I don't think it's ever been a secret that the state's played shady games. I don't think it's ever been it's Falcons Tush. I don't think it's ever been a secret that things that Kratz did, and Kratz is a shady motherfucker. It's never been a secret that Kratz is a scumbag and that he lied on the stand. But every judge after that knows all that. The Supreme Court knows all that. That's not going to change anything. If that's the argument that she's fighting, she's going to lose. She needs a stronger argument that definitively shows that they did not do it. That, period. I found it really interesting. I know you're a huge Brandon fan. I found it interesting that they moved him to a medium security. That says a lot. Now, it doesn't say they're going to get him out, but he's been worse in prison than Stephen has, and Stephen's still in max, which that I found even more interesting. Stephen, I heard, has not had one thing go wrong, where Brendan's got a couple of write-ups, and yet they still moved him to a medium facility. I found that interesting.
A couple of, you mean the having
having pancakes,
to one of his cellmates
having stealing an extra pancake.
All I'm gonna say is when they were getting ready to release Brendan, the reports from the prison described Brendan as a prisoner as exceedingly benign, and I'm just gonna leave everybody with that little gem.
But on the same token, though, Stephen's got 0 write-ups, and he's still a max. So I just think I don't know if his attorneys did that, if that was, maybe Max was becoming overpopulated, if he was in danger, but I just found it interesting that they moved him to a medium facility. Now, moving on. Those are the 2 things that I really read. See, I'm not ashamed to say I really don't follow the case anymore. That's why I got you on here to explain it all. All right. So the other thing that I did read, I felt the beginning it was blah blah blah. All right. State procedural bar arguments are themselves barred under. All right. So you were talking about this. I didn't really read this. So explain what that meant.
Well, the whole thing is that all along the state has been arguing, because they didn't want to argue the merits of this. they've been arguing that Stephen is procedurally barred from bringing these claims at this time.
But he's not.
Well, obviously, because the Court of Appeals has remanded it.
That's what
So
I'm
that's
saying.
basically, that's out the window. But that's what they were arguing. And that's in all of their, all their responses and everything. They kept arguing that he was procedurally barred and blah, 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 and stayed away from any of the merits. They didn't want to go anywhere near talking about whether or not the state actually gave these things away when they shouldn't have. They were like desperate to stay away from that. Well, it's, now it's at the point where they now have said, they gave back bones that they don't know what they are. They've said that now in a response, that we all read about a week and a half ago.
See, but I don't believe that, though. And I don't care what the state says. I have a hard time believing that based on Kratz's, and this may not even be like filed or anything, but based on Kratz's own words that he believes that they're human. Forgetting the case for a second, I can't imagine that they didn't test them under secret or whatever to know that they weren't giving the hawbucks back, cow bones. So I think they did test them and just didn't report them. Like, why would the hawbucks, if it was your dead daughter, would you want bones of a cow to say that it was your daughter?
Right.
I have a hard time believing that they didn't test them to know exactly what bones. And then I think the bones that they still have are fucking animal bones. I don't think that they kept maybe one or two, but I think they try to give her the whole body as possible, and gave them to her. And the only thing they have left are the animal bones. And then they could say we still have animal bones. That I've always said that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Mostly, I'm pretty sure what's left there is not usable because she says that in her motion here, where she talks about in Leslie Eisenberg's own lab notes. Basically we see that items, and she rattles off a list of about 7 different bones, and then one bone, 80,000. All of them are in the 7,000s, and then there's one that's in the 8,000s. The 8,000s is the hip bone that you hear everybody talk about, right? So that hip bone was determined to be possible human. And the state only talks about, pretty much only talks about that bone in their response. They don't talk about the other fragments that Zellner is referring to, because in Eisenberg's notes, she says that those bones are human, not possible human, not could be human, she says they're human. So that's why Zellner wanted to get those. That's why she feels they're exculpatory, and that's why she feels that this is a, violation of Stephen's due process. And the state is showing quite a bit of bad faith, which is going to help strengthen her young blood claim.
But
whether it happens in Judge Sucketis's court, or whether this is going to happen in the appeals court, or whether this is going to happen maybe in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, or possibly in federal habeas, I don't know. But these are the issues at hand. They broke their own statute, and Zellner even points out in her response, or in her reply, that there's case law where it shows that yes, in Osborne brought a claim of violation of due process, but he didn't point to any state law that had been violated, or statute, or anything that had been violated, because there was no requirement in that state to preserve the evidence he wanted preserved. So because there was nothing in his state, and he didn't bring the claim in that way, saying that the state broke its own statute, he did not win in the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court did say in that decision that if somebody came before us and they actually were presenting basically where the state broke its own statute or its own law, then we'll say, yeah, that's a violation of due process. We would have ruled differently on this. But because Osborne didn't have the state violating something it had created, he fell short. So that's what Zellner points out in this, that Stephen has that. He has the Wisconsin statute that's been violated. So therefore, the state's argument there is really not valid, because Wisconsin does have a statute to preserve this evidence.
Okay, but that statute is not what everyone thinks it is. And I even got clarification on this from Tracy herself, is that the law is very, very open. It's not definitive that says this, and this. It's very open to interpretation.
Open to interpretation, yes.
And they cannot, like this, it's such a tricky thing. And there are a lot of laws like that, but it's such a tricky thing that it's too open to say that they definitively broke it, because they didn't. If the bones belong to the Halbucks, then the bones belong to the Halbucks, and they deserve it. That's why I think these bones were tested secretly, and I think that's
Well,
why they
they
gave them
may have
back.
been. I mean, I've either that or before the state filed its response, maybe a couple of them went over and had a little sit down with the Hallbox and said, "Look, guys, we really believe that these bones were Teresa's," and they may talk about the secret testing that may have happened, like you're suggesting, and they may say, "Look, we're going to be saying in our response that we don't know what we gave you. Please don't." Take it as anything. We just want to keep Steven in jail. And, I'm sure like this, I can imagine a conversation taking place so that making sure that the Hallbox didn't buck on this when they see, or when their friends start coming to them and telling them, guys, did the state give you animal bones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously they had to do something first. They had to get this. They had to set the Hallbox up for this, so that they didn't find out, like, in a bad way. So, I mean, I'm thinking a conversation took place, and we'll have to see what happens. I mean, I gotta imagine that the Hallbox don't find any of this very amusing.
I don't think they care. I think they just feel that they have the right guys in jail, and that's all they care about, and they're done.
I feel that way, absolutely. It's like I said on my channel earlier today. I don't expect the Hallbox to become Steven and Brendan supporters, but I can see, the possibility of them wanting to separate themselves from the state and all of this ridiculous crap that keeps coming out. I can see them wanting to distance themselves from that, personally. But like I said, I don't expect them to become sis boom ba rah 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 for Steven and Brendan. But I can see them not wanting to be associated with the state.
See, I totally disagree with you, and here's why.
Okay.
The state keeps winning. They haven't lost yet. They've given KZ absolutely nothing. In 3 years, she has not even gotten a small little bone. She's gotten nothing. So if my focus was like the Hallbox, in my opinion, why would I distance myself from the state when they keep winning? According to, even with Brendan, Brendan was overturned and returned and overturned and returned, and he's still sitting in jail. The man was like, papers were signed to be out, and at the last second, the state won again. So that's where I think you're absolutely wrong on that, because the state keeps winning.
Oh, they may be winning. I mean, wrongful convictions generally take a pretty long time to sort out, and there's a lot of this at the beginning, a lot of losing, a lot of frustrating losses. It's kind of just part of the way it is right now on post conviction. It's a new area of law in a lot of ways, or at least in the sense that only now are we getting lawyers that are looking to venture into post conviction law, like as their specialty.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people didn't want to do that before because there were no pioneers in it. There's no
boring.
It's not a lot of supporting case law when you're going post conviction. It has a lot of difficulties in that sense. There's a lot of bars when you're in post conviction, procedural bars, this and that, whatever. So there's a lot of reasons that make it daunting.
Who told you there's not a lot of case law to use? Post conviction law is easy. It's just a lot of research and a lot of work.
Well, like I said, I'm just saying she points out that a couple times in this motion that there's not like a lot of solid case law. And it's like I said, it takes a long time to get people out is my major point. It's like the average is about 15 years. So it's partially, the system wants to be sure. They don't want to just let animals out of the cage for no reason. So sometimes they are a little extra, stringent on things, or, whatever. What happened to Brendan is a travesty. What the on-bank majority did, was disgraceful. But you know what? I respect the process, and eventually we will get Brendan out, and we'll do it the right way, and we'll do it legally. And I think the on-bank majority decision will eventually be referred to in a later decision by another court and called what it is, a piece of crap. Well, they probably won't refer to it as a piece of crap, but they'll probably refer to it as something else. But anyway.
But again, they followed the law. I don't agree with their decision, but they followed the law as the law is written today. That's the part that a lot of like
They followed it as
diehards.
they interpret it.
No, it's the law, the way the law is written. They even said that to her in the pre-en blanc hearing, before it was the full one, that there is no law to support it. This has not happened before. So there's no law to support it, and Laura just wasn't experienced enough to fight with the en blanc panel. I mean, 99% of all lawyers will never have to do that. And that's
Right.
across the world. They'll never ever have to, like probably 99.9%. She wasn't experienced enough. KZ's never even done it, and look how many fucking cases she's had. And that's okay. Like, I don't blame Laura for that. Like, 99.9% of lawyers will never have to do it, no matter how big you are, especially the full panel. So, like, I don't blame her for not being experienced enough. But there's a lot of things you said I totally disagree with. But I don't want to get too much into that. I want to go through the 68 fucking pages first. Then we can argue later. But so
I got about 20 more minutes. So
the
so you know.
first thing wasn't that big. Successive supplemental motion is not pursued. We've done that already.
Talked about a lot of it.
There was one that caught my eye. Stated a cognizable claim for relief under blood has met his pleading burden. What was that?
Oh, that's just her responding to the state saying that Stephen hasn't come up with enough evidence, basically, to support his claim or whatever, which is just ridiculous. We have the reports that show them giving it back. We now have their admission in their response that they gave them back. They don't know what they are. But the state was trying to argue that he was procedurally barred and all these things, and it was just not. It was not. Let me see. What was that part again?
The 4 or 5. The destroyed bone evidence was apparently exculpatory or potentially exculpatory.
Right. Well, let me just pull it up here. Okay.
Mr. Avery, having stated a cognizable claim for relief under 97406, has met his pleading burden.
Yeah. So what? Yeah. So he has proof that they did all these things. They have a phone call from Mark Williams actually calling KZ, thinking he's talking to Fallon, and telling Fallon that we should stall and basically obstruct. And so she has all these things that show the state is trying to hide this. They were being dishonest. So the pleading burden is really met. The evidence is there. It's, these things happen. And so it's disingenuous for them to argue otherwise. They did violate the statute. That's undeniable. The statute requires them to hold on to the evidence. She showed in this motion, there was something interesting. She put in a clip and she actually put in an excerpt from, where'd it go? I don't know. I can't find it now, but she actually underlined it where it said, the most important thing that contradicted the state. I can't remember the wording on it right now, and I can't find it either. But I don't know. This thing was brilliant. I was sitting there reading it last night, and I was just laughing. It was just awesome to read because she was just pointing out over and over again, like the Osborne thing was very interesting to me. How she was pointing out that they're arguing apples and oranges because Osborne brought his claim to the Supreme Court, but there was in the United States Supreme Court, but there was no state law to help support him. So there was actually no statute or anything violated by the state. And so it wasn't up to the United States Supreme Court to basically assume, a law was broken. So they made it clear that in the future that, there needs to be something that the state has in place that is broken or violated or whatever before they can do something about it. So that's the main gist of this motion. I mean, she's just saying she's responding to all the state's claims that they're barred procedurally. She responds to all those things and explains why she believes that they are not barred. And she makes pretty effective arguments. Oh, here's that part I was talking about. So it says, after the time for appeal or post-conviction remedy has expired, a person in custody under sentence of a court claiming the right to be related upon the ground that the sentence was imposed in violation of a U.S. Constitution or the Constitution or the laws of the state. So that's where she's basically pointing out that in this case, it's not the United States Constitution, but it's the laws of this state of Wisconsin that have been violated, and therefore gives Stevens' claim relevance. So, you know.
Okay, but at the same time, and I see it was a lot less pages than I thought because I'm looking through it. It's mostly
There's a
about
lot
the
of
rapid
affidavits.
DNA. Yeah, and a lot of rapid DNA stuff. But the bones weren't destroyed; they were just given back to the Hall box.
Well, now they've been given back to the call box. They've been buried or something. They've been handled by other people. There's now a contamination issue, even if. So it would all have to get argued in court as to whether or not they've been contaminated. That's if the Hall box chose to allow everybody to have them, or it would require an order from Judge Suk to have them exhumed. One of those things would have to happen first in order to be able to test them. But then there would be the arguments of the fact that they've been contaminated and blah, 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 blah. And that would all have to get argued out in court before they ever decide whether or not they can test them and stuff. So like I said, this is going to be a thorny issue. And we'll have to see how many twists and turns it's going to have. I bet it's going to have a bunch.
I hope you're right, because I don't know. I just see a lot of bullshit. A lot of let's see if it sticks kind of thing.
It's not the way I see it. I see the state doing that. But you're also looking at it, the states it's like home field advantage for the state. And you're right, it is. So Zellner is the underdog coming in, just making her arguments. And I think her arguments are 10 times better than the state's. In my opinion, they're way better.
They are, but she's not using Wisconsin law in a lot of it. And that's what the state keeps pointing out. And every time I read one of Zellner's motions, I'm like, oh my God, this sounds awesome. Until I read the states, and I'm like, okay, Zellner didn't follow X, Y, and Z. And then I'm like, how the fuck could she not follow X, Y, and Z? And then I get frustrated. Because I'm like, I just don't get it. How do you not follow it?
Well, I mean, obviously, people with the legal acumen that know about the law and stuff may see something there. I don't know what exactly you're referring to, but I don't know. She's starting to cite a lot of Wisconsin law, in my opinion. She obviously is not strong in it. Obviously, she comes from Illinois and Chicago, and that's mainly where she practiced. But okay, now she's branching out into Wisconsin. That's why she had to get, Steve Richards on board, a Wisconsin attorney, to help, with that sort of stuff. But yeah, she's having to get up on Wisconsin law as she goes along here.
Sarah, definition of contaminated is the family has already touched the bones. So to test for DNA on the bones after funeral directors touched them and the family touched them and doctors touched them and everyone touched them, that's contaminated. That's what he means by contaminated. But it's been 11 years. So that's why it really doesn't matter much.
Oh, chain of custody shows them being in a locker in a bag. And so people can be somewhat relatively certain that they've been, not dragged around and, all that sort of stuff. The whole idea is that they are pristine in the way they were when they were picked up, so that they yield, credible evidence, to help solve the crime, right? So, anyway.
Also, hold on. Did I turn my camera? Yeah, I did. In your opinion, and then I'll give my opinion. Mm-hmm. Do you ever see Steven seeing the light of day?
Yeah, actually, I feel pretty confident that Zellner's going to be successful eventually. It may not be super quick like everybody wants. It may not be instant gratification, but I do think that eventually there will be success.
But you're also saying that it is 15 years. It's not 15 years, though. It's
That's
15
an
years from the
average.
time they no. It's 15 years from the
Sometimes
time
it's
they go to
7, sometimes
jail.
it's 2, sometimes it's 25, sometimes it's 40. I
No,
mean,
no,
it's
no.
just
But that's the
yeah,
amount of time they're in jail. That's not the amount of time that somebody's been working the case to get them out.
yeah,
That's
right.
where this misconfusion comes in. I've heard a lot of people say, I even cases, oh, it takes 15 years. No lawyer's working on a case 15 years. The person has been in jail 15 years, and it's been like, let's say 5 or 6 years by the time they get a trial and then get out. But it's not 15 years from the time a post-conviction lawyer comes on and then gets them out. That's an average of how long an innocent person will stay in prison. And sometimes shorter, sometimes longer.
Yeah, it's like I said, the court system isn't really exactly excited about letting people out, so it's not easy to do.
Oh, that
So
I
yeah,
know.
yeah, you know, so that's where she's at. She's got a difficult task. Uh, I appreciate what you're saying and everything, but I just think ultimately she's going to find success because when I keep looking at this, more and more dirt keeps coming up. More and more crap keeps coming up. I mean, this newest thing about them, the games they're playing with the bones, and then holding back the ledgers and reports that showed what they did. I mean, this is just once again showing their dishonesty, and I'm sure there's going to be more. I'm sure something else is going to come down the line here that's going to show it again. I mean, it's just because it keeps happening.
But
You
other
know,
than the bones, other than them giving the bones to the Hawbox, nothing else is new. It's the same fight. Kratz hasn't changed.
well,
Kratz's
you also
speech
have the
hasn't
CD
changed.
issue. Okay, that's a Brady violation. Okay, the Wisconsin since that was decided by Judge Suk, the Wisconsin Supreme Court has changed the way that Brady is interpreted in Wisconsin. It's no longer about defense due diligence. It's
No.
about was the prosecutors hiding it,
Mm-hmm.
and they are clearly were hiding that CD, trying to play games with the way that they turned over the DVDs and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Very, very, very close to the time of trial when Dean and Jerry were very busy trying to get ready for trial. All that stuff suddenly gets dumped on them. So there's a very clear issue here, and with the new interpretation of Brady, that could easily go the opposite way. That could be a big thing for Steven. So look, I'm right now just being patient and waiting and seeing what's going to come. I am finding all of this stuff very interesting. In my opinion, the state looks worse with each passing day. Um,
See,
it's
what
just
worries me though, and I did some research on this, not tonight, in the past,
uh,
most Brady violation cases today, or technical cases where someone can get out on technicality, has now turned into Alfred pleas. And Zellner swears she's not going to do an Alfred plea, which makes me think he's never going to get out because in back in the day, if the prisoners got out on technicalities, like it just happens. If there's a technicality, your conviction gets overturned and you get out. But in like the last 10, 15 years, the courts are not letting people out on technicalities. And the ones that they have no choice, like in Nora Jackson case, they had no choice because there was just no fucking evidence. But in order for her to get out of jail, they had to give her an Alfred plea. And I see it more and more with these technicalities
right.
that they'll let them out, but only on an Alfred plea. And that's also what makes me afraid for Steven is Zellner's made it very clear she's not doing an Alfred plea. But
Yeah.
if if there's a Brady violation and they're not going to let a possible murderer out on a technicality, it's either going to be an Alfred plea or you're not getting out. That's what worries me about this case. That's
Yeah.
about Steven's side, not so much Brandon's side, more Steven.
Right. Well, that may be, but it's just for me the that's what's part of what needs to change. I mean, that's part of what attorneys like Kathleen Zellner are going to start to help forge here as post conviction law becomes more and more popular because of the Zellners of the world and stuff. We're going to get where the problem is that people's options are so limited in post conviction. You get barred easily and things like that. It just that's what it's always basically the hurdle, and I think Zellner is bringing awareness to that. And hopefully we're going to get a situation where these states aren't going to be able to play these games that they're doing to force people into Alford pleas, because essentially people are forced into an Alford plea because the state won't do anything. The state just lets them sit, even though there's a problem. The state doesn't do anything about it, and these people don't get a chance to do anything to help, to prove their case, because the state will just sit on it and not do anything unless they agree to do an Alford plea, right? For instance, look at Michael Peterson in the staircase. Guy gets out. He's on that ankle bracelet for 2.5 years, folks. 2.5 years. They drugged their feet. They weren't going to do anything about it. This is the type of stuff that's going to end up getting exposed by attorneys like Zellner and David Rudolph. And eventually, hopefully, we're going to start getting legislation passed in our states that's going to require our DA's offices to be a little more honest about the way they deal with this stuff.
See, but that's where I disagree. I think he's guilty as fuck.
Oh, I'm not here to argue Michael Peterson's guilt or innocence. I'm just showing that is a ploy that states use. I think it just illustrates that. But
absolutely,
I'm personally on the fence about Michael. But my reasonable doubt was not removed, and personally, my reasonable doubt wasn't removed. But I'm in some ways on the fence about Michael.
Guilty. No, that's just what worries me about this case, is that in the state of Wisconsin, in Manitowoc County, Calumet County, wherever the fuck county he is, they're not letting him out on a technicality, especially because they think he's such a horrible human being. What I don't understand, and I've never understood this, and it's not talked about often, why his first case is not more in Zellner's wording, where she's not making it a bigger part of his post-conviction hearing, when it takes such a huge precedence of how he ended up in this position in the first place. Right. And maybe she hasn't had opportunity. Maybe it's going to happen in trial. I don't know. But it's always, I got a hair in my mouth, but it's always worried me and always bothered me that she's not using that. And that's a huge part of how he ended up where he is today. And, I kind of look at it as you have to go to the core before you can fix the outside. You have to go right to it, right to what caused it all. And I would think, I
kind of agree. I've been talking about Greaseback and Colburn all week. I've been hammering on those two. About the way Greaseback didn't send over the information about the Brown County Police Department call and all that stuff, showing that he was hiding and protecting Colburn, and how him and Mark Rohr, why would you not send that information to the AG's office and everything? So I've been hammering on that this week. I agree. She really does kind of need to point out that, look, this has happened in the past. This is kind of relevant, and I agree.
Exactly
I would like to see a little bit more of that. But I do have to head off now. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Erekose. And guys, make sure you subscribe. I know the mods have been posting this link. I think it was Steph that said you only needed 7 more. I don't know what he was talking about, but it was something about 70.
To get to 7,000, I think.
Is that what it was?
Or am I at 5? Or am I going to get to 6? I can't remember now how many subscribers I have. Jeez. Anyways, but thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for all your mods. Thank you for sharing my links. Thank you for having me on. Great discussion. I love to get to talk about this because this thing was fun to read. So thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
So that was my little talk with Laura about the recent reply in the motion for leave to reply to the state's response, which was unsolicited. So, a lot of things going on here, a lot of, guesswork really until we get the, decision from Judge Sukowitz, basically, letting us know what she decides, obviously. So, is there going to be an evidentiary hearing or not? I mean, obviously the Falcons of the world seem to think there's nothing to see here, but unfortunately that was biological evidence deemed by the state's own forensic expert to be human, and so it was potentially exculpatory. You know, anyways, this all needs to get argued out in court properly. And the more that gets blocked, the more that gets sidestepped and you know, ways around it and all that stuff, the more suspect the state of Wisconsin looks. So hopefully that's not going to continue forever. Anyways, that's about it for tonight, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see ya.
Hello.